Morning Year 10, going to look today at the process of respiration, and key things you want to do today is look at the formula for respiration, particularly aerobic respiration, state what it is, where it occurs, what the products are, look at the main roles of respiration or the energy released within both animal and plant cells, and explain the roles of different organelles and organs in respiration, and also look at some experiments that can be done to investigate respiration. So your first activity though is to complete the starter quiz that is on Teams, just to check what you understand, what you do, what you don't know, any misconceptions you've got. Give yourselves 5 minutes. Okay, so hopefully you've now done the quiz and you've either got it all right or you've made a few mistakes. It doesn't really matter. The next few slides are going to take you through some key ideas. You can make your notes as you go along, pause the video where I say, or if you need to pause it, just pause it as you go along. So, key thing about aerobic respiration then is it is a chemical reaction occurring in the mitochondria where we have the breakdown or oxidation of glucose using oxygen. Now, for GCSE, you're allowed to say that the glucose reacts with the oxygen and we get an energy release. It's an exothermic reaction, and the reason for that is because the products have stronger bond energies than the reactants, so as they make those new bonds, more energy is released than was required to break the bonds in the reactants. That's a little bit of chemistry link for you there. So let's look at the formula. So it's glucose reacts with oxygen, and carbon dioxide and water are produced as waste products. And the key thing here is we have this release of energy, or transfer of energy. Now, where the energy needs to go to is actually to another chemical energy store. So glucose, if you remember, is a chemical energy store, chemical potential energy store, and actually we're just transferring that energy into another molecule that can move around within the cell, which is called ATP. You don't need to worry about that for GCSE, but those of you who are going to do A-level will definitely need to know that. You can just say energy is being released. And that is the useful energy that the cell can use, which we'll talk about in a moment. But actually also quite a lot of energy is transferred as heat or thermal energy and warms up the surroundings. You know, when you do exercise you get warmer. That's because you are doing more respiration to provide the energy for your muscles to contract, and actually releasing a lot of heat energy as well. And actually this heat production, even though it is a waste product, is important for mammals and birds because it's how we maintain our body temperature higher than the surroundings. We're constantly losing heat energy to the environment. As long as the environment's cooler than we are, we're constantly radiating it out, so we actually do respiration to help maintain our core body temperature and keep it above the environment. So you need to know the word equation, but you also need to know the symbol equation. Okay, so we've got glucose, C6H12O6 is an organic molecule with 6 carbons in it. It's sort of hexagon shape, if you ever see it drawn out. 6 oxygen produces 6 CO2 and 6 H2O. Remember, these are molar values. Okay, so 1 mole of oxygen would react with 1 mole of glucose would react with 6 moles of oxygen to produce 6 moles of CO2 and 6 moles of water. That'll make more sense if you've done that in chemistry. And again, we've got our energy release here. So make sure you've got that information clearly in your notes, and if you keep using the wrong word about the energy being given off, make sure it's really clear. Okay, let's think now about where aerobic respiration goes on. So aerobic respiration occurs in the mitochondria. Here's an electron micrograph of a mitochondrion, and here's a little diagram of it. You can see that has a highly folded inner membrane. It actually has 2 layers of membrane. There's a membrane-bound organelle within the cell, and the inner membrane is really, really highly folded. There's other little extra bits here. Mitochondria actually have their own DNA, which is circular, and their own ribosomes. You might want to think about evolutionarily where they came from. It has circular DNA. But the key thing is there's highly folded inner membrane with lots of enzymes embedded on it. So I want you to think just for a moment, what's the benefit of that highly folded membrane? Okay, hopefully you thought about the idea of large surface area. So if If you've got a large surface area, you can have more enzymes on it, and therefore a higher rate of respiration is possible. Yeah, always remember, highly folded generally means about having a large surface area, and in this case, because the enzymes are embedded on it, you can have more enzymes, so you have more respiration possible. Okay, so always remember, mitochondria are the site of aerobic respiration, but other organelles within the cell are also important, okay, but in a more distinct, more separate way. Okay, so just have a think for a moment. Why is a nucleus important? Why are ribosomes important? Why is the cytoplasm and cell surface membrane important? Or are they? Give yourself a minute to think about that. Okay, so the nucleus does not do aerobic respiration. If you wrote that down, it'd be completely wrong. But remember, the nucleus contains the genes that are the code for making proteins. So in other words, for making the enzymes and all the other bits that make the mitochondria. So without a nucleus, you couldn't have mitochondria. And the ribosomes, again, do not do aerobic respiration, but they are the site of protein synthesis where the enzymes for respiration will be produced. The cytoplasm doesn't really have a role for aerobic respiration, but it is actually where anaerobic respiration happens. And for those of you who do A-level biology, you'll find out more about how those two processes link together. The cell surface membrane, remember, that is your barrier that affects how things move in and out of the cell, and the cell surface membrane is permeable to carbon dioxide and oxygen and to water, so those molecules can diffuse across easily. One more question before you move on. Have a think about how will the number of mitochondria in fat storage cells be different from, say, the number of mitochondria that you find in the liver and muscles, and why? Hopefully you got the idea that they are there going to be more in the liver and the muscles because those are more metabolically active cells. They're doing more chemical reactions, and muscles are working to create muscle contraction. The liver is doing lots of chemical reactions to process your blood, whereas fat cells are just storing lipid, not doing very much. They're fairly metabolically inactive, so they're going to have fewer mitochondria in them. Okay, it's actually one of the reasons why girls tend to need less energy than boys for the same body mass, because girls tend to have a higher body fat ratio than boys. Boys tend to have more muscle once they've gone through puberty, and therefore they're going to be more metabolically active. Obviously that depends on the level of physical activity of both the boy and the girl, but in terms of their fitness and all sorts of other things. But generally girls have more fat tissue than boys, so they're less metabolically active overall, so they need less energy in their diet. Okay, let's move on and have a think about the uses of energy within the body. So have a think, what are the uses of energy? Hopefully you should already pick some of these up from the starter. So key thing, maintaining body temperature in mammals and birds. So that waste heat energy is actually important for us. Okay, so it is a use of energy within humans and other mammals and birds. Muscle contraction requires energy to make it happen. Sending nerve impulses, so sending electrical signals down your neurons, requires energy. It actually involves active transport. Cell division, so movement of the chromosomes and dividing the cell, requires energy. Active transport, mentioned before, moving molecules against their concentration gradient requires an input of energy from respiration. And then any building of larger molecules from small ones, so DNA replication, protein synthesis, cellulose synthesis in plants, lipid synthesis in organisms, all of those things, anything you're making bigger molecules from smaller ones, going to require an input of energy. Make sure you have these ideas in your notes. Have a little pause for a moment. Okay, just have a little bit more thinking about how respiration links in. Remember, every cell in your body is doing aerobic respiration. Every living cell in the body is doing it. Okay, but in terms of supplying the substrates and removing the products, you need to think about which organs of the body are important in supplying those things. So have a think for a minute. What organs are they? How are they involved? In fact, give yourselves 3 minutes now just to write down a couple of bullet points. Okay, so did you get, well, hopefully you got the lungs are important because they're the site of gas exchange. So oxygen diffusing into the alveoli, CO2 diffusing out of the alveoli. Did you have the digestive system? That's where you absorb the glucose and lipid and other things from your diet once you've digested them, and especially in terms of our formula, glucose is our important molecule. Did you have the circulatory system? Remember, circulatory system transports glucose in the plasma, oxygen as oxyhemoglobin in the red blood cells, CO2 back to the lungs in the plasma. Okay, remembering when you're answering questions, you might need to put the detail about how the molecules are being transported, not just how they're being, not just all that goes in the circulatory system. Actually, oh yeah, oxygen is in the oxyhemoglobin in the red blood cells. You could also have the liver. Now we haven't done the liver yet, but the liver stores excess glucose. If you have too much glucose in your blood, your liver is able to store it. So your muscles actually has a molecule called glycogen, and if you start using up all your glucose in your blood, for example if you're doing exercise, your liver can break down glycogen and put it back into the blood for use by your cells. So that would be another thing. That's probably something I wouldn't have thought, but I would have expected you to know about the lungs as being the site of gas exchange, digestive system for absorbing glucose and other molecules obviously, and the circulatory system for the transport. Okay, remembering these are well adapted surfaces for exchanges, the lungs and digestive system, and then you've got your linking up system, circulatory system, that links those exchange surfaces to all the other organs in the body. Make sure you've got some of those ideas down into your book now. Okay, final thing we're going to look at is the little investigations we can do. Okay, we can't do the ones we do in the lab normally. When we get back we might have time to do them, but we are going to talk to you about one that you can see, and you can look at examples I think online, but I'm going to show you the information here. So when you're measuring the rate of respiration with small organisms or plants, things like that, you're often looking, like you would do with photosynthesis, looking at changes in the level of carbon dioxide or oxygen, so the levels of gases, so either substrate gases or product gases. Okay, it's difficult to look at changes in levels of sugar, for example, although obviously with photosynthesis you could look at starch production for something like that. Okay, but what we can do with respiration, we can look at CO2 production. The faster CO2 is produced, the more quickly lime water, for example, would go cloudy if you were bubbling it through. You could time how long it took for some lime water to go cloudy and look at how much CO2 is being produced. You can also use indicators that change colour depending on how much carbon dioxide is in solution, and one of them is called bicarbonate indicator, sometimes called hydrogen carbonate indicator, and you can see here it's red in atmospheric levels of CO2. The lower the concentration of CO2, the more purple it goes, and notice the pH goes up because CO2 is an acidic gas, so the less of that acidic gas there is, the higher the pH will be, and as CO2 is produced and more CO2, we get a lower pH, well, sinking to a lower pH because it becomes more and more acidic. Notice that pH is still not actually acidic, but you get the general gist. Okay, so as long as you get that idea, more CO2 is yellow, less CO2 is purple. So let's have a look at experimental setup on the next slide, and you can think about the questions and come up with some answers. So here we've got 4 tubes, A, B, C and D, and they were set up in sunlight and left for an hour. We've got pondweed, we've got snails, we've got pondweed and snails, we've got pondweed here but surrounded with tin foil. Notice the tubes are sealed, so any gas that's in here is the only source of any gases that can go into solution in the water. The bicarbonate indicates solution, which is mostly water with the indicator in it. So bicarbonate indicator solution, remember, was red at the start of the experiment, and it will go yellow if CO2 concentration increases, and it will go purple if the CO2 concentration decreases. So 3 questions for you. Which tube will go purple? Explain why. Which tubes will go yellow? explain why, and which tube do you think will have no colour change at all. Give yourself 6 minutes to write an answer worth 9 marks. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, so let's have a look, see what you wrote. If you got it right, brilliant. If you didn't, if you missed something, add these answers to your own notes. So in tube B, it should go purple. Tube B, we've got pondweed on its own, and it's, remember, in bright light for an hour. So there should be photosynthesis happening at a faster rate than respiration. So CO2 should be being absorbed from the solution by the plant at a faster rate than CO2 is being produced by respiration. So therefore the concentration of CO2 will decrease. Yeah? In tubes A and C, well, we've got two different reasons here why it's going to go yellow. But basically, there's no photosynthesis able to go on either of these, because in tube A it's covered with tinfoil, so no light can get through, so no photosynthesis. And in tube C, there's only snails, so there can't be any photosynthesis because snails are animals. So we've only got respiration going on, aerobic respiration, and production of CO2, so the concentration of CO2 is going to increase, so that's why they're going to go yellow. And therefore, by process of elimination, it's going to be tube D that is going to probably stay the same. Here we've got pondweed and snails, so maybe, and remember this is a suggest question, so it may not be that it's in balance, but maybe the rate of photosynthesis by the plant and the rate of respiration in total by the snails and the plant are equal, so there's no net change in the carbon dioxide concentration. Yeah, so any CO2 produced in aerobic respiration will be used up by the pondweed doing photosynthesis. So just take a few moments now just to consolidate your notes. Obviously you can review the video, add any extra notes you wish, and that's it. Thank you.